Hi guys, Olive here today to say hello, to catch up with you a little bit, and to talk about some of the great books I've read recently. So you may or may not have noticed that I took a little bit of a break from this channel. I'm going to briefly talk about that before I jump into talking about the books. If you only want to hear about the books, I understand. I've divided this video up into chapters, so you can feel free to skip ahead to the books, or you can watch the entire video. It's up to you. This is normally the time of year that I take a little bit of time away from my channel. I slow down on posting. It's a time of year when I feel like a lot of us are spending more time outside, reading is less of a priority, and it's always good for me to give myself just a little bit of time to catch my breath during the spring months, to garden, to do other things, just have a little bit more me time. That is normally, though, something that I plan for ahead of time, and I normally give you a heads up that I'm about to do it, that I'm about to take some time off. This year, life really snuck up on me, so I ended up needing more time than I thought I was going to need, so I just quietly took some time for myself. In the past, when I've had those busier times in my life that I know we all have at different points, I would just push through those. I would sacrifice a lot of my own free time. I would push myself far beyond the point that was good for me in order to keep content going up on this channel. I only have myself to blame for that. Nobody forced me to do that. I did it because I've always had very high expectations of myself, and I really value this channel, so I would put it ahead of other things in my life. And that's just not something I want to be doing anymore. I don't think that's good for me in the long run. So as much as I want to be posting, as much as I always have, I need to look at what's realistic and what's good for me at the end of the day. So my apologies for disappearing. I don't want to be doing that going forward, but looking ahead to the rest of 2024, it is shaping up to be one of the busiest years of my life. I am juggling a lot of different things right now. All good things, all positive things, all things I'm excited about. It's just a lot at once. So I can only promise to do what I can in terms of posting. I'm excited to be back. I'm happy to be back, but I need to be realistic. All that being said, I do very much want to get back on track with my reading lists, my reading goals that I've had for this year. During my time away, I wasn't even reading as much as I normally was. I do feel like I just needed a breather from the book world in general, and that's what I took. I didn't stop reading entirely, but I did slow down. I was watching a lot of basketball and Vanderpump Rules. I was gardening. I had 2 different weddings I went to, which were both a blast. I hosted a panel at the Greater Pittsburgh Festival of Books. It has been a very busy time. There has been some book stuff in there, but I was definitely taking it easier. But I'm feeling the pull back to books now. I miss the presence of books in my life, so I'm ready to get back on track. So to jump back into the BookTube world, to get myself used to filming BookTube videos again, I figured I would start off by talking about some of the standout reads that I've read over the past few months. So to begin with, I will just very briefly add my voice to the chorus of praise for Emily Henry's newest romance called Funny Story. This one has been everywhere, so I'm assuming you may know what this one is about, but I will tell you that it's about 2 people who have been recently dumped, and they start living with the ex of their ex. So the 2 dumpies are living together, and they decide that they're going to pretend to be together when both of their exes announce their engagement. I don't even know what more I could say about this book that hasn't already been said by everyone out there who loves Emily Henry, and for a good reason, but I will say that I loved the characters in this book. As always, it was so funny, it was so charming, but it had a lot of emotional depth, as all of her books do. And I really liked in this one in particular, there was a lot of very realistic yet non-aggravating conflict that kept the 2 characters from, at the very least, fully committing to one another. If you read a lot of romance books, then you know that there are all of these arbitrary roadblocks between the 2 main characters that keep them from being together, when really, if they would just talk to one another, everything would be resolved. That's not the case in this book. I felt like all of that conflict was very true to life. I liked this one a lot more than I liked Happy Place. and almost as much as I liked Book Lovers. But all in all, this was just exactly what I wanted out of the new Emily Henry. The other novel that I loved, I guess, is a little bit more of a controversial opinion, because Here in the Dark by Alexis Solowski does not have that good of an average rating on Goodreads. It's a thriller, but I found that it reads a lot more like a noir. The main character is a very self-destructive theater critic. I mean, she goes as hard on her liver as she does on the plays that she reviews. And we see at the beginning of the book that she's interviewed for a magazine. And the interview itself struck her as being kind of off. And then she finds out that the man who had just recently interviewed her has gone missing, and she was the last person to see him alive. And because she lacks boundaries in her personal life, she takes it upon herself to investigate his disappearance. Do you know that song Slow Like Honey by Fiona Apple? That lyric where she sings, slow like honey, heavy with mood, that is what I think of. That is what I feel when I think of this book, except this book is also dark and it's snarky and it's dramatic in the way that only a former theater kid can be. Our protagonist in this book is not a likable character in the slightest. In fact, she is downright messed up, and I think that is a huge reason why this book does not have a good average rating. I think a lot of people look for main characters that they can find themselves in, that they can root for, and that's not the experience here. It's why I said this reads much more like a noir, and I think a lot of readers aren't going to be familiar with seeing a female main character in a noir type book. So it might seem a little bit unusual, but I absolutely loved it. I would so much rather a main character have depth and be really interesting, even in a tortured way, rather than be someone I can just blindly root for. So long as the author at least hints at a reason why or even how this character became so twisted, then I am fully on board. The story itself is really well paced. I thought it was intelligently constructed. There was so much tension that was maintained throughout the entire book. I absolutely devoured this. I couldn't get enough of it. I received an advanced audiobook copy through the publisher. Thank you very much. I loved it. If you like audiobooks, highly recommend this one on audio. This is one that I would read again, even though I know what happens. But moving into nonfiction now, the first one I'm going to talk about is also one I listened to on audio. This is one I listened to as I was on a road trip, traveling to an out-of-town wedding. The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell became available through my library, and I chose to pick it up. I chose it for that road trip because I thought it was one that my husband might be also interested in listening to, even just in pieces as we drove. This is an essay collection about cognitive biases, many well-known ones, things like the sunk cost fallacy, confirmation bias, the halo effect, amongst others. Many of those are very well known, but what she does that's interesting in this book is she applies those to modern phenomena and also incorporates a lot of her own personal experiences to drive her points home. For me, not a lot in this book was novel, because I've read a lot about psychology over the years. This is hardly the first time I've heard about any of these cognitive biases, but I thought that her perspective and the application of them to things that we see in our day-to-day lives, I thought it made it feel very fresh. It didn't end up mattering that I already knew a lot about all of these different biases. So I really enjoyed this. I liked the writing, and reading it made me all the more excited to finally pick up Cultish here very, very soon. But from our minds to the minds of other creatures, I also read a really great nature book called The Mind of a Bee by Lars Chitka, which essentially dissects the cognitive abilities of bees, from their ability to wayfind and recall significant landmarks, to the social learning that they do, how every bee is an individual, but how evidence currently suggests that they share information and also decide democratically where to swarm. The author of this book is a German ecologist. He's an academic who has published a lot throughout his career, but a lot of that was academic writing. From what I could see, it seems like this was the very first book that he published for a lay audience. And while he does present a lot of studies in this book that supports all the data that he talks about, It doesn't get stuffy. He gets a little bit wordy at times, but in general, I thought everything was presented in a very accessible, entertaining way. I learned so much from this book and had so much fun doing it. And it was exactly what I wanted versus a different book that I had tried to pick up about bees called A Sting in the Tail. That book was so disappointing, just like a massive waste of time. This was what I wanted by picking up that other book. So this was my antidote. Another springtime selection that I picked up during my time away was called Infused by Henrietta Lovell, which is a nonfiction book about tea. However, it is not meant to be a history of tea. As the author even says at the start of this book, it's not meant to be the story of tea, but her story of tea, her history with tea. She has owned her own tea business since 2004. She sells loose leaf tea sourced as nearly as directly from growers as possible. So this is a memoir, travel writing, and food writing blend in which she talks about falling deeply in love with tea, traveling all over the world to find growers of high quality teas, and also trying to find buyers for her blend. But then she also talks about things like trying to get the British to fall back in love with drinking loose leaf tea, getting them away from tea bags and back to the good stuff. And then there's also a section where she talks about trying to find food that will match up perfectly with specific types of tea. I have never seen tea spoken about like this author speaks about tea. She speaks about tea like sommeliers talk about wine. She clearly has this deep love and respect for tea. She loves what she does. She talks about her own personal story. She's a fighter. Like, this book will inspire you to go seek out new teas, to try new teas, to notice new flavors in the teas that you're drinking, to go for the multiple infusions of the leaves as she encourages us to do in this book. It is such a luxurious sensory experience. The writing is fantastic. Like, if you love tea, this is an unmissable book. Also, in the spirit of spring, the beginning of baseball season inspired me to pick up Moneyball by Michael Lewis, one of the 24 nonfiction books I wanted to make a point of reading this year. This book tells the story of a former baseball player turned manager who started to focus on some very specific player statistics in order to find very good quality but not too highly paid players for his severely underfunded professional baseball team. And he did that instead of relying on the attractive but often deceptive qualities that traditional scouts normally look for. And by doing this, he assembled a team that basically no one believed in, but the results spoke for themselves. And it actually inspired a lot of people within baseball to start looking more closely at statistics when choosing players for their teams. Michael Lewis is just so good. He is so good at what he does. There's a reason why his books become so successful and inspire movies to be made about them, because it doesn't matter at all if you don't care about baseball statistics, because somehow you will by the end of this book, because Michael Lewis makes his books about the people within them, about their dramas, about what they're going through, about what they care about. And so if they care about something, he describes it in a way that also makes you care about it because you're so invested in these people and their stories. Because of that, I can see why this became such a success. I loved it. I went on to go and watch the movie, and I really enjoyed that as well. I think my favorite part of this book, though, was the draft, which happens pretty early on in the book, where the whole team is just waiting to pick the players that this manager's statistics had shown to be the best deals. And you're just waiting. You're on the edge of your seat waiting to see if the team is going to get all the players that they want. I thought it was so thrilling. Maybe that was just because I was getting ready for the WNBA draft at the time I was reading this. It has now happened, but I was very hyped for it at the time I was reading this book. So maybe that contributed. I don't know, but it was the high point of the book for me. But stemming off that idea that you can find talent in places you least expect it, the last two books I'm going to talk about in this video, I decided to discuss together because, at least for me, in the reading experience of reading both, they very much go hand in hand. There's Hidden Potential by Adam Grant and Grit by Angela Duckworth. I wanted to talk about these two books together because I feel like they are both trying to tackle this notion that so many of us have that excellence is innate, that unless you're a natural at something, unless you're good at it right away, that you might as well give up because it's just not in you. Both of these University of Pennsylvania professors would disagree with you there. Adam Grant's book is all about how excellence is built. It's created over time through a lot of practice and embracing mistakes, using those to learn from. And then Angela Duckworth's book is all about what it takes to keep going through that very challenging, often very discouraging learning process, continuing to persevere through that even when you feel like you're not getting any better, even when you feel so frustrated, is a quality that's often referred to as having grit. That's why I feel that these books are very much a 1-2 punch and should be read that way. I think you need to read them closely together in time to get the maximum impact. And they really struck me that way because I am currently in a phase of my life where I'm trying to do multiple challenging things at once. Ideally, I would only be doing one of these things at a time so I could give it all of my energy, but that is not how things are shaping up. It's just not what the world is presenting me with at the moment, so I'm going for it. And I found that these books have been so motivating and helpful for me in my process of doing all of these things. And also I found that they're just very reflective of things that I've noticed within my own life. Like, I can't tell you how many comments I've gotten over the years of people saying that they like my presentation style here on YouTube. They like the way I talk about books. They like that I don't use a lot of filler words. And it seems like a lot of people think that I'm just a natural at doing this, that I just came out of the womb ready to talk about books on YouTube. And I try to remind them each and every time that this isn't a natural result of me just sitting down in front of the camera. This is the result of years and years of practice. I have had, I don't even know how many hours of practice sitting in front of my camera, going through the editing process, noticing things that I like and don't like, training myself to not rely on filler words. I also decided at a certain point that if I was going to have a YouTube channel, that I wanted it to be quality. And so I've made choices to try to improve with each and every video. So anytime someone wants to think that this is natural, I assure you it is not. It is a result of a lot of practice, of a lot of hard work. And I think that's true of anything really worth doing. If you want to get good at something, you have to work at it and you have to commit to it and you have to push through even when it's not super fun. You have to realize when you're making mistakes, you have to take hard feedback. It's all of those things. So if you too are trying to do something challenging in one or more areas of your life and you want some motivation in the form of some science-backed but anecdotally driven stories that can help motivate you and give you some ideas for how you can push through the often very messy learning process, I cannot recommend these highly enough. I understand that just by looking at the covers, it looks like just basic self-help. But I promise you, I am not normally one for self-help books because I don't like empty platitudes. But that's not what you're getting into with these books. So those were the highlights of my reading over the past few months. I'm still not sure what I'm going to be doing with my reading over the summer, so I'm not going to be making a June TBR. I'm looking at previous month's TBRs. I'm trying to see if I want to still pick those books up, if they're still making me excited. I need to look at all of my books right now and figure out where I want to go from here because I want to be excited about the books that I'm picking up. So I'm going to figure all that out. The only thing I know for certain that I'm going to be reading in June is Rules of Civility, which I will be reading for literally the 10th time. I'm very excited about that. Everything else I'm going to figure out. So I appreciate in advance your patience and understanding as I get back in the swing of things. If you have thoughts on any of the books I spoke about today or about anything in general, please feel free to put those in the comment section below. All the books that I did talk about today will be listed and linked for you in the description box below. They're there for your clicking convenience. And then at the very bottom of the exact same description box, you will also see links to everywhere you can find me around the internets. Goodreads, Instagram, the Story Graph, all the places I'm the most active, in case you want to keep up with what I'm reading and doing right now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.